Hey there! You are listening to the In Kinship Podcast, a podcast for makers who crave a joy-filled, vibrant, lit-up life on their own terms. And I'm your host, Tina Vandenberg. Thanks for being here. Today's solo podcast, I am exploring the idea, and I'm guessing you have had this experience in your life before. Okay, you know when you have something that you should be doing sort of nagging you, it's not really all that fun maybe, or maybe you don't know where to begin, so you just don't get started. And so you avoid it and you avoid it, and it like sits in your little naggy things I should have done before spot inside your body, causing you mild pain. Not so much that you can't like move on to like eating Oreo cookies or something like that, but like, it's there and sort of like dragging you down a little bit. But we're strong. We'll persevere through the avoidance, through the procrastination. And then all of a sudden, you go and you have something else you need to do. And you're like, you know what? I need to do that thing I've been avoiding doing. I need to do it right now. And all of a sudden, you do this thing that you've been avoiding for gosh knows how long. Instead of doing the thing that you now need to do, the new thing that you're avoiding. Do you do that as well? So earlier this week, I went to the grocery store and I went hungry, which is never a great option, right? Like we all know better than to do that, but I went hungry and I purchased so many things. I had done some grocery or some meal planning beforehand, so I had decided I was going to make all of these rather intensive meals. And internally, I was like, Tina, what are you doing? Like, you don't have the time for that. You have some online classes you're teaching at night. You have some things going on. You've got your little boy. Like, whew, let's just simmer down a little bit on some of this. But instead, I made a plan for all these different meals because it was just the right thing to do, right? And I made a grocery list, and I get there, I get all of the fresh food for these intensive, intricate meals. And then I also decide, you know what? I've been wanting to pressure can some meals. So I'm going to pressure can some salsa verde that I'm going to do from scratch and put that with some pork because that's going to save me time later. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a turkey meal, all these different things. I bought this new cookbook, actually. It was called Meals in Jars or something like that. I can't remember the name of it, but I'll put it in the show notes on pressure canning meals in jars. So I have been craving having that in my pantry. I have been thinking it would be really nice for those busy days to be able to just open up a meal that I cooked myself from scratch and serve it for my son and I and not have it be a great big thing. Like I find I'm so often, like so many of us in this world, struggling to get all of the things that I need to get done. And I feel like I'm not spending as much quality time or as much present time as I want to with my little boy, especially since I share him with his dad a second of half the time. So I thought, this is a great idea. I'm going to do all of these things. So I buy all the ingredients for that. I mean, like 9 pounds of pork and 4 pounds of turkey, just all of this stuff, right? In my little shopping cart, you know what I'm talking about? I had one of those little bitty shopping carts, which I absolutely adore, is overloaded. And so I go and I go through the checkout, and it's way more than once it's put into a bag can go back into that cart. So I have to go get another cart and haul all of this out to my car. And you know that I work from home and so I set my own hours. So all of this is right after I drop my little boy off at school. Like this is like taking 2 hours of my time. 2 hours that normally I would have started working by now. And so I'm already feeling this kind of pinch of like, you have a lot of things on the agenda that you wanted to get accomplished this week. And now you have all these groceries to take care of, right? Like this is my internal dialogue as I drive home. So then I get home and I look in the pantry and I look in the fridge, and I live in this little tiny house. I actually have like a little apartment size fridge with a little bitty freezer. And I'm like, this is not all going to fit in here. I have to do something with this. So I proceed to pull every single thing out of my pantry, clean it all up, get rid of everything that's outdated, get rid of everything and donate the things that are not outdated, but that I'm no longer eating because I've changed my diet. All of these things I get sorted out. Then I move on to the fridge and I pull everything out of the fridge. I wash it all down. I get all the gunk out of underneath the crisper drawer. All the ketchup that got spilt somehow, all the things that happen in the fridge that I don't really understand. It's all cleaned out. And then I clean out the freezer because I'm like, well, I have a little bit of freezer space. I need to put this and this in there because I'm not going to actually get to that till the weekend. So, like, all of this, right? It takes me almost all day until I have to pick up my little boy. And then I get all the groceries that I just bought put away. And yes, I had a giant sense of satisfaction. I had this giant sense of, whew, look what I have accomplished today, right? And a sense of soothing and a sense of ease, while at the same time having this massive, like, sort of panic in the back of my body that says, yeah, but look what you didn't get done today. Like, I didn't get any work done to move my business along or for the company that I work for, which, to be fair, I'm not under a deadline. Like, all of that can be done anytime, but like, I had planned to do it this day. I hadn't done any of the things that I was scheduled to do, that I was planning to do. Instead, I did this project. And that was on Tuesday. This is now Friday that I'm recording this podcast. So that entire time, I had sort of this guilt sitting in the back of my body of like, look at that wasted day that you had on Tuesday. And, to be fair, when we look at it, it wasn't exactly wasted. Like, cleaning out the pantry feels really good. And making space for it feels really good. But then Wednesday night, I had to can one of the meals, and that took until 11 o'clock at night because it doesn't begin, like any of you who are canners, it takes hours and hours to can something. And the salsa verde pork that I was planning to cook, which I did, was intensive. I had to roast all the tomatillas. I had to make the salsa. I had to brown all of the pork. But first, I had to cut it all off the bone because it was on big roast, and I had to process it. And then I had to take and process it through the canner. And it was like, the whole time I'm thinking, what in the hell am I doing? Like, not only do I have a lot of work to accomplish, but it's also nearly Thanksgiving. I have things I want to make for Thanksgiving dinner. And my Christmas gift list has gotten huge and out of control. I really need to cull it back to be like, whew, you need to bring this back down, right? And part of it is, I know that you can probably relate to this too. This is totally a side note here. But when I make something for someone, it's such an act of love that buying something for them doesn't have the same depth for me unless I know for certain it's something they want very, very badly, right? Then if I'm buying them something that I just think might be kind of cool and that they might kind of like, the satisfaction that I get as the gift giver out of that is so much less vibrant than I get when I make something for them. Even if they both are sort of simple things, right? It's just that there's so much care and love that goes into something that's handmade that it feels really good to make stuff for the people that I love. And yet, I don't really have a lot of time to do all of that, right? Like, the gift making should have started back in July, to be honest, because it's gotten quite large, the list has. And so I'm not entirely certain at this point why on earth I would choose to add on a whole pantry clean, intensive meals just to eat during the week, and 2 different canning projects for this week. And it's like, and not to mention, the man I've been dating is a hunter and he got a deer. And so we'll be processing that deer on Sunday as well. So I'm like, what is that? And there's a part of me that when I do this to myself, I do get this sort of giddy laughter that's like, oh, Tina Marie, what are you doing? You know better than this. And why are you like this, right? And there's another part of me that when I look at it and I start to think about it, I think, all right, so obviously I was feeling a sense of being out of control, and taking the time to clean the pantry and to clean out the fridge and to get everything really organized felt like a very soothing act for me. One, I got to finish and start something completely, and I have a lot of projects in general in my life that are up in the air, that are moving around, that I don't know how they're going to turn out. I know that they're going to be beautiful, but I don't know what kind of response there's going to be to it. Like, there's a lot that's unknown in my life and in my business because that's the nature of it, right? So that's probably where that was coming from, is that if you look at the newsletter that I just sent out recently, and this is November 2024, I put out a lot of information about the programs that I'm doing in the coming year, which feels great to have some really clear details on what it is that I want to provide. But I also am putting a lot of energy out there, and I think that cleaning the pantry gave me this sense of security, or maybe more of a sense of control and order and having something finished, right? Because I have so many things that are out there that are unfinished and I won't really know how they're going to turn out until months from now. So there's that. And then I started to think more about it and I thought, all right, so why am I choosing all these canning projects? Like, why right now? Like, none of that is timely as far as I bought the ingredients from the grocery store. They're going to be there in January, in February, when I arguably might have more time for such things. Why right now would I choose to do a canning project or three? And I thought, all right, it's probably the security of it, right? Like, I always feel really secure and sort of rich in a way when when I first get wood delivered, as an example. I don't generally cut down my own wood, but I get it delivered and I split it myself. Um, and while I no longer rely 100% on wood heat, I do still really love having a wood fire and in the wood stove. And it's something that I find very cozy and comforting and like a very secure kind of thing, which is kind of crazy because I know some people find wood stoves to be scary because of the fire factor. And in my life, I've been in 3 chimney fires in the homes that I lived in as a child. There was 3 different fires. And so it's intriguing to me that that did not scare me, but more, I still find a lot of security and safety around a wood fire. I think it's because if everything fell apart, I know that I could find wood, I could cut it down, I have an axe, I could do what I needed to do, and I could take care of the basics on some level for my family. So I think it hits on that security level for me. So canning food does the same thing for me. It gives me that same feeling of richness and security that comes from having a full woodshed. I don't have a woodshed yet, but you know what I mean. That same kind of concept. So if I think about it, if I really am gracious with myself instead of being like, are you an idiot? I think about, all right, what was I trying to achieve by this? And not consciously. This is all very subconscious. Like, I did not consciously go into that grocery store and plan to do much of that. I say much of that because I did know what ingredients I needed. So actually, it didn't begin at the grocery store. It began when I did the meal planning. It began when I was making the grocery list. That's when the wheel started to turn and I started to decide I was going to do all of these projects right now. But it wasn't conscious, and I didn't consciously like step back long enough to be like, all right, but do you really have the time right this minute or the energy, right? I just went for it. And I think those times in our life are just powerful messages to us that something's out of balance because we're trying to right that balance, right? We're trying to soothe ourselves in that moment. So for me, in this epic Tuesday, I think there are like 3 elements to it. One is I was feeling out of control and like I had a lot going out without any knowing of what was going to happen with it. I felt probably insecure in that because it is my livelihood. And so there is that essence of like, I want this to work out and I want to be able to serve people. And I know that it's going to be a beautiful product, but am I in front of the right people? Are they going to want to join me in this adventure? So there's uncertainty in there. And then that kind of brings in that insecurity aspect as well, right? And so obviously for me, I chose cleaning and organizing and canning food and preparing really delicious meals for my family, intensive meals, um, as ways to bring security and order and control into my life. And I believe that we are always trying to get our needs met. For a very long time, I studied nonviolent communication, which, if you're unfamiliar with that, is just a beautiful practice. Um, and one of the premises of nonviolent communication is that every human has the same basic needs, and we're all attempting to get them met, some in more costly ways than others. And while this wasn't like horribly costly, there can be much more costly ways of doing things. This is somewhat costly, right? Like, honestly, the beauty of life is I continually get to readjust. And, if you've been listening for any length of time, you know that I am constantly in balance and feeling amazing. And then, choop, I tip out of balance and I rewrite myself. Like, that is a constant rhythm of life. And I don't think that's just unique to me. I believe that's how we all behave, actually. That's how we all interact with the world, is that we're moving along and we're in balance and everything feels really at flow and beautiful. And then something tips out of balance and we get triggers that, hey, something's not quite right. And we rewrite it and bring it back into a center space. And I think we do that over and over and over again in life. I think that there's a beauty to that, actually. I also, for a long time in my 30s, I was a human resources manager at a natural food co-op. We had like 60 employees or something. And while I was there, my boss said something to me that I have never forgotten. And he was talking about, this human interaction that we have. So when you're an employee, you're working for somebody else and you are exchanging your time and energy and expertise for cash or benefits, whatever that might be. So there's an exchange. There's always an exchange. And he was mentioning that if an employee does not feel like they are being fairly compensated, and that doesn't necessarily have to mean they're not making as much money as they feel like they should. It could mean that they're working more hours than they think is fair. It could mean that they don't get as much respect from somebody that they feel like they should be getting respect from. Could even be something outside of the company, right? But if somebody has a feeling that they are not receiving a fair compensation for what they're giving, they'll sort of write it themselves. They'll be less productive at work, take more breaks. Maybe they'll pad their hours a little bit. Like, there's some question about where ethics come into this, but ultimately we as humans are self-righting creatures. And so we will try to bring things into a balance that feels like it's safe for us. And sometimes that's more costly, not even just safe, but it feels like it's fair, I guess. So sometimes that can be more costly than others. But the reason he brought that up to me was because as a human resources manager, one of my goals was to have that communication between someone's boss and themselves and try to bring that relationship into balance, because that would bring so much more satisfaction to both the employee and the employer, and it would allow everyone to shine, right? Because when we feel like we are valued, we shine. So that's my little side note. But I found that statement to be so profound, and I think about it a lot. I think about it in my own life in the ways that I will attempt to right my ship when it feels like it's off, like seeking security and control and order by bringing it into my pantry, into my canning pot, right? And so then I get this opportunity, to like have some grace with myself and maybe a little smile and a little Tina Marie, what are you doing? And then maybe I have a chance to see, all right, well, what ways then can I bring more security, more order, and a little more control into my life that is not as costly as taking the whole day to clean the pantry and add a bunch of projects onto my list that I don't really have the time and energy for right this minute. I love that. I love that when we listen to what's happening in our experience, we get the opportunity to hear what's behind it. In fact, this is really intriguing is that I started to write my newsletter today. And I hadn't really even sat down with this yet and thought about why I had added this. I was still in that phase of like, what are you thinking? It kind of phase, right? This like background of like, why did I add this stress to my life? And then I started to write my newsletter and it became evident to me. I'm like, I know exactly why I did this. And so I guess I'm advocating and reminding myself for having those deep, mindful practices that let you go into, all right, why have I done this thing in this way? And what was I trying to achieve by that? And then I try to do that with my son too, right? Like, all right, so my son has been really angsty. I can't think of a better word for it, but he's 9 and he's just his emotions feel more adult than they have in a lot, like, well, ever really. They feel more mature, I guess. And as such, they're a little more scratchy, if you know what I mean. They just feel more complex, I guess, than they used to for a mom from the outside looking in. And so often his responses to me this week have been really short or frustrated, and that immediately triggers me. And I don't always respond the way I want to when I'm in the middle of that. And so I stop, and I'm trying to, I should say, I'm trying to stop and think about and consider, all right, why is my sweet, loving little human reacting this way to me over a simple question or this or that, right? And I try to ask him that, and I know he doesn't have all of the words just yet to respond to it, but sometimes he does. And so I'm attempting to be more present and just hear what he has to say, but also have the grace to understand that we do things that don't always make sense because they're not always a direct correlation, right? Like deciding to can a couple of meals, which makes it sound small, is not small. This is a giant project. It's not that big, but deciding to can a couple of meals and clean out the whole pantry doesn't seem like it's related to feeling a bit of stress over putting things out into the world without knowing what was going to happen. Right? That isn't a direct correlation until I go deep inside of it and I figure out, oh, that's what's going on in my life right now. There are probably some other aspects to that too, and I find it really intriguing to think about it. But I try to bring it into my relationship with my little boy as much as I can. You know, the days that I don't behave like a grizzly bear instead. And even when I behave like a grizzly bear, then I get that opportunity to be like, buddy, I'm sorry I responded that way. That's not how I wanted to respond. And we get an opportunity to try again because we get to continually right the ship and we get to continually work towards things. So that's what's on my mind this week. I'm also really excited about the projects I have coming up, about the second season of With Ease. So if you're in the newsletter, you'll see that. I'm dreaming up the projects we're going to work on, and I have some other really fun parts of it that I'm scheming on and very excited for. And I'm planning out the guest speakers for the second edition of Break the Rules of Sewing. So if you listen to that series, we're going to have a second season of that in January. I think it's going to live in January from now on. So hopefully it goes on. Year after year, it's just such a beautiful experience. So I'm excited for all of that. Like all of these things I'm putting out into the world, I'm extremely excited for. I've been really fine-tuning the details for my spring retreat and my fall retreat. I think in the spring retreat, we're going to do some bra making, or bralette making rather. And I think we're going to do a different location, a location that is a little more intimate, all-inclusive. So we'll have a chef that comes in and cooks for us, and we'll be in a retreat lodge just for us, that kind of thing. I think it'll be kind of exciting to see how that feels and how that goes. And then the fall retreat is going to be a Mackinac still, because like that's just so much fun to be on Mackinac Island and to ride our bikes around the island and to do our dance movements and our morning circles. And that retreat, by popular demand from retreat people in the past, is going to be a bring your own project kind of retreat. So it's going to be knit focused. as far as like sewing knit garments focus, not knitting. And there'll be some small bite-sized lessons involved in it, and you're going to have expert help to help you get the project exactly how you want it, exactly how you want it to fit, exactly the kind of style and design you want it, so people can bring their projects that they want to draft from scratch. They can bring other patterns that they want to work through that feel really challenging. Whatever they want, it's going to be so much fun. So that's going to be in October. I believe the spring retreat will be in May. And so I'm excited for all of that. All of that feels really amazing. Isn't it also intriguing how we can be both excited for something and it can cause us a little bit of stress as far as the unknown of it and trust and putting that out into the future and not knowing like financially how that's going to turn out or how it's going to be received. Is that the right kind of thing? Like all of those things. It's just amazing how nuanced life is and how many emotions any one thing can bring up in us. And so, yeah. What are you working on? I hope it's something amazing. And I should say too, I do have a sale going on right now that's very timely. So it is from right this moment, Friday, November 22nd until December 3rd. It's 20% off of all the workshops I have. So you can actually get in on the With These Season 2, which doesn't begin until February, but you can get it now for 20% off. So how exciting. All right. Thank you for listening. I hope you have the most wonderful day. And if you have a moment, will you share this podcast with a friend and jump onto your favorite podcast app and subscribe and leave us a review? That's going to let other people who might find this interesting find us. So, all right. Thank you so much and have the best day.